perhaps let's talk about what has come out, and I suspect you will probably have a thoroughgoing conversation with Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki there.
Absolutely, who had pointed out a little bit earlier on, Ngambi, that the expansion of Brics is almost a foregone conclusion. Like you rightfully mentioned, Lula da Silva of Brazil, speaking about the GDP of these countries that are now going to be joining Brics as of January, going up in terms of purchasing power to some 37%, and the population of these 11 countries to almost 50%. And this has been adopted at the Johannesburg II Declaration, Ngambi. And it's not just about expanding Brics, it's also about the common currency trade. Because as we heard from the chair of Brics for this year, at least this year's summit, Cyril Ramaphosa, speaking about global momentum on the use of local currency, saying we are ready to explore opportunities for improving stability and fairness of global financial architecture. And so the finance ministers as well as the Reserve Bank ministers of these countries have been tasked with considering a payment system, and they will report back at the next summit to be held actually in Russia next year, as we heard from Vladimir Putin yesterday. On the issue of expansion, like you rightfully mentioned, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates will be joining Brics. What will it be called? Perhaps we'll find out a little bit later on as the Q&A session will get underway. But for now, as you rightfully mentioned, I'm joined in studio by a political analyst and chairman of the South African Institute of International Affairs, Mr. Moeletsi Mbeki. Mr. Mbeki, it was a foregone conclusion for you that there will be expansion, and there you have it. 5 countries that will be joining Brics, 2 of which are African countries. The selection of these countries, when you take a look at the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, it must be deliberate, especially when you take a look at not just their financial muscle, but also their population.
Yes, these are big countries. These are important countries in the world. They are important countries in their region as well. In Africa, Ethiopia and Egypt are big countries on the continent, and also they are influential countries in their region, Ethiopia in East Africa, Egypt in North Africa, but they are also important players on the African continent generally. And of course, Ethiopia is the head office of the African unity, of the African Union, yeah. of the African Union. So I think from what I can see, this was a very well thought out expansion plan to include Argentina from South America. Argentina, I think, is the second largest country after Brazil in the southern cone of South America. And then in the Middle East to include Iran, which is in dispute with the Western countries, but it shows that Brics is not deterred by countries that are involved in all sorts of conflict with the Western countries. They accept them as members of the Global South, and they're proceeding with their participation in the affairs of the Global South. The UAE, of course, is a very important player, especially economically and geographically. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, these are very important parts of the logistics system of the Global South and indeed of the world. So they're very important to be included in enabling the communication within the members of Brics, because airlines like the Emirates probably go to all the member countries of the old Brics and the new Brics. So that's a very strategic decision to include the United Arab Emirates in this expansion.
And some of them are oil-rich nations, which is an added advantage.
Well, they have a lot of money. Yeah. It's an added advantage. Saudi Arabia, of course, is a very important player in And the good thing about Saudi Arabia and Iran is that they have been at loggerheads over a whole lot of issues, but they appear to have resolved their disagreements, and they are now on speaking terms. I think they have exchanged ambassadors already. So all in all, I think it was a well thought out expansion program, and it shows that Brics is becoming a backbone for the creation of a unified voice for the global south.
Which is what some of the leaders remarked. And when you speak of a backbone, Lula da Silva speaking of the GDP in terms of purchasing power going up to 37% and the world population at almost 50%. And then Vladimir Putin of Russia noted that they're still to establish the rules and the procedures. So there's a number of issues that will have to be ironed out. If you were advising this group of nations, what will some of those issues be that are top of mind for you?
Well, of course, there's still the issue of the trading mechanisms, which have been referred to the finance ministers and so on. But I'm not sure myself that is a big priority for the global south as such. It has to be looked into in the medium to long term. The issues of peace, I think, are important. The India-China issue, the conflicts inside Ethiopia, these are the issues that need the BRICS countries to help to solve. I think for now, it's much better to have a limited expansion of BRICS than to have a big expansion, because then you lose direction. With the expansion that has been decided upon, BRICS remains quite a small group and quite a cohesive group. There are no major differences amongst the new members, the 5+6, right? Oh. So I think it's moving in the right direction.
A major cohesive group that stands the potential to stand its own or present its own against the likes of the G7, G20?
Well, I think they will form an important bloc in the G20. They will form an influential voice within the G20. It's much more cohesive than the G20, by the way.
How so?
Because the G20 includes the global south and the west. So there's always, there has been lots of disputes, for example, within the G20 about what statements to issue about the Ukraine war, about various stuff. So it's a much less unified group, the G20, than the emerging BRICS, expanded BRICS.